say on this show, it all depends from where you are watching us from in terms of the time zone. Welcome to The Leader, courtesy of the Evangelical Alliance of Kenya on Hope TV. We're so glad that you could find the time to engage with us because today's topic is one that is so relevant to us individually, as a people, as a community, as a nation, and indeed the world. It's all about having the heart of a shepherd, the shepherd's heart. And I'm so glad that today we have someone who I hold in very high esteem in many ways, more ways than one. That is Reverend Munengi Mulandi, senior pastor at the church where I worship, Nairobi Baptist Church. Karibu sana.
Asante, glad to be here. This is my first time, you know?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
But wow, where do we begin? I think we'll start just by who is Reverend Mulandi?
That's a hard question. You need to have multiple choice questions so that I can choose E, all of the above.
Yes.
So I am a believer, and that defines everything of whom I am. I mean, I could say I'm a husband, God allowing and permitting, this November we turn 27 years of marriage.
Congratulations.
We have two children. One turns quarter. The first one turns quarter of a century in a few days. Actually, on the 31st, and we're really looking forward. But all those things, you know, I work like you said. You know, I'm a son. But the central thing is because of being a child of God that defines, that gives a definition and even accent to all these other things that I could say that I am, and you know, different trainings that I've received that have made me who I am, and experiences, but they are all on that foundation that I'm a child.
Wonderful.
Most High God. Yeah.
Actually, I was looking at some similarities
Mhm.
and some differences,
Yeah.
and some, what should I say, would have been on the opposite sides
Mhm.
way back in school.
Aha.
Uh-huh.
I didn't know you were going to go
I
there.
was going to go
Uh-huh.
there.
Uh-huh.
Some similarities.
Yes.
One wife, one
Okay.
wife, tick,
That's good.
same.
Mm.
Two boys,
Aha.
tick. He went to Patch. No, I didn't go to Patch
Mm.
because I went to the other side,
Yes.
the school.
Yes.
But it's okay.
You know, I was there as well.
Yes.
I was admitted to do my A levels there, but there was a crucial subject that I wanted to do, and they didn't have that combination. The class was already full by the time I got called, and so that's how I was in that Duke of York
Yes.
school for 45 minutes, but I endured.
I think we've done enough sales pitch, lest we get invoiced.
Yes.
But the alumni, no, we've done our part. All right, let's get into the present.
Mhm.
The shepherd's heart.
Yeah.
What does it mean having a shepherd's heart from where you sit?
You know, Dugetman, the world is currently full of all kinds of ideas of and good ideas. I'm not attacking them, but they're good ideas, they're good principles. Follow these three things, and you will be in the area of leadership. You know, we've been given leadership toolkit here and there. And I wanted to add one more thing there, but I think it's just not an addition. It's not like an herb when you're cooking that's optional that you throw it in some oregano or some parsley. No, this is really foundational to the pot. And the heart of a shepherd, the shepherd's heart, really is what makes all these other things to be effective. Because if the shepherd does not have that heart, if the leader does not have a shepherd's heart, then they cannot take the people where they need to go, whether it's as a nation, whether it's as a community of faith, you know, the church, whether it's even at the family level, and we have different leadership positions in the family, whether it's in the corporate world, in industry, in academia, in the military, you cannot be a leader you can have leadership skills, you can have strategy, you can have all these things. But if you do not have the shepherd's heart, then you're compromised as to how far you can go and how much you can achieve, and the kind of ability to perpetuate the vision and its accomplishment over time.
In fact, what I'm hearing from you then
Mm.
is that ministers who have a shepherd's heart,
Mhm.
I could hear the words or the theme compassion
Uh-huh.
from what you're saying.
Yeah.
I could pick out self-discipline.
Uh-huh.
You can't be an effective leader if you yourself are not disciplined.
Mhm.
You also cannot be effective if you're not bold.
Mhm.
And we'll, cross-reference this with
Yeah.
the shepherd,
Yeah.
mchungaji,
Yeah.
that we know of.
Yeah.
And again, being relentless in defending the flock.
Yeah.
And of course, speaking the biblical truth.
Yeah.
Because then you can be very effective in all this, but lead people astray.
That's true.
And indeed, truth be told, let's be vulnerable.
Mm.
There are those who are ministers of the
Mhm.
cloth.
Yeah.
And may I compliment, but I'll speak to going west at some point as you're looking for those sheep.
Yeah.
Those who are of the cloth, and you can lead the flock astray.
Mm. That's very true. And you can either lead the flock astray or misuse them.
Mhm.
That's very possible. Or lead them to where you want to go. Not Edmund, one of the verses in the Bible, and I'm really thinking of leadership in these 3 or 4 arena, whether it's leadership of the nation, whether it's leadership of the home, whether it's leadership of the community of faith, or whether it's corporate leadership, wherever it may be found. And there's overlap between all those. But I think one commonality is, if the leader does not have a shepherd's heart, then they have shot themselves in the foot, and they'll be like a shooting star, brilliance, and great takeoff, but the fading starts immediately, and it doesn't last, beyond the horizon. But there's a verse in the Bible that really anchors my thoughts on this, and it's about Moses. And most of the time when we talk about Moses, of course, we talk about his great achievements, 40 years of leading these sheep who don't always want to go the way. There are great leadership lessons there. But I find something very interesting in the commentary about his life that is given in the book of Hebrews, chapter 11, in the Heroes of the Faith. It says that when he was 3 months old, his parents saw that he was not an ordinary child. And I said, what do you mean? At 3 months old, even these, developmental milestones for children, there's hardly anything you've observed. It's just a child, But that's the heart of a shepherd. To be able to see potential when it's not visible. And some people say, oh, some leaders, they just do magic, they go to this organization and they transform it in time. It's that ability to have a heart that sees an area that is not as it should be and what it can be, and to face head on the challenges. It says later on about his parents, about Moses' parents, and they fear not the king's edict. And if this was a Bible study session, we'd have a field day going about that. But there was the boldness to confront the challenges between what was there and taking him to become what he needs to be as a leader. And they saw that he was no ordinary child. Edmund, I wonder, when people come into our churches, when they come into our organizations, when they come into our families, are we leaders if we don't see what they could become? One of the leaders' greatest challenges is seeing mistakes. The kind of schools you and I went to, and anybody who went to high school knows this, that prefects could smell something that you did wrong last weekend.
This is before the era of Bluetooth.
In school, we were not allowed to wear stockings, the socks
Yes.
that go up this way, with trousers. Trousers, you're supposed to wear shorts. I mean, this sounded colonial to me, but a prefect could tell that you're wearing trousers
And
with
what
long
yes.
socks, the stockings, and they could tell. They could even tell if your stockings don't have gutters.
The
You know,
gutters to hold.
those rubber band kind of
For
thing.
those who are not gifted with Mazguembe.
And they could tell. And many leaders are like that. They only see the faults.
Yes.
But a good leader has a shepherd's heart that they can see
The
potential.
potential.
You know, it doesn't mean they're blind to mistakes, doesn't mean they're blind to these other things, but they are not distracted from seeing, you know, like it says of God, he sees things that are not as if they were. Then a shepherd follows that heart of God and sees this recruit in the military as a potential general 10 years from now, and does not fear the king's edict of the processes that need to happen to get there. You know, the pastor sees the same, the Bible study leader sees the same, the parent sees the same, you know, and in our politicians need to see the same. You know, our leaders of government in the different, they need to see this is where we are, the Kenya shilling at 150, you know, but see potential, you know, and not just talk. You know, I had conversations that by tomorrow, by next week.
Yes.
That's good motivational speaking, but we need to go beyond that and not fear the king's edict. Means putting the mikakati, as it were, to make that dream come true. And that's how they made this basket. That's how they, you know, put it with pitch to make it waterproof. That's why they put it on the Nile and placed him there. That's why they had the sister watching over him. And the rest, they now left to God. They saw he was no ordinary child, but they just, and that's one, and the most important thing, but they just also didn't sit there and say, oh, he's no ordinary child. He's no, they confronted the hurdles.
I'm interested in that direction that you've taken and what you've just said. But at times, and some of us, truth be told, are, well, beneficiaries, as it were, of those who saw potential in us, even when we ourselves weren't aware of the same. And then we say the stars were aligned. You know, I can see something in you that even you yourself are not seeing it. And things happen. From where we are, things happen, but not from God's perspective, because that was what he intended.
Edmund, I think we're too enthralled. We're too taken up by being self-made, whether self-made men or self-made women, self-made leaders.
Yes.
And that's not a shepherd's heart. A shepherd's heart realizes that I'm here shepherding people to a certain destination, but I too was shepherded. Because if we take that verse, Moses had no contribution at 3 months old to his not being an ordinary child. You know, somebody saw it, somebody nurtured it, somebody saved it, groomed it. And I think we become good shepherds when we take time to realize that we were made. And it's not that, you know, pulled myself up by my bootstrings. No, I am a made man. There are people who have made sacrifices financially, time, counsel, but there are people who've also laid their lives on the ground for me to walk on their backs, for me to stand on their shoulders, and some at great cost, you know, sacrificially. There are places you and I are because some people chose that we are facilitated to take that opportunity. Then they
And that's
compete.
where it comes in. You said we are facilitated, because I was just reflecting on the self-made. Self-made. It is a world that we're in that tends to appreciate and say and speak to Reverend Mulandi, self-made man, because then it speaks to your ego, and then we're looking for the heroes on earth that you can see, feel, and touch. And in so doing, dare I suggest that we are, how would I say, on things that are earthly, because we don't recognize, appreciate, intentionally or otherwise, realize that it is not so much us, but there is a higher being, and to whom all glory and honor should go to. So when we subtract God from this, then we have heroes on earth that you can see, feel, and touch, and say, no, this is the guy who should be our leader because he's self-made.
You bring an interesting point. Much as leaders need to appreciate that they are not self-made men and women, and need to appreciate those who have brought them there, that can go to an extent of sycophancy. But you see, if you realize I am whom I am today because of so and so and so and so and so and so, but who lined up those so and so's to bring me to where I am? It's God.
Yes.
So I need to go back and realize, Ephesians 2:10, I am God's workmanship, created in Christ for good works, that I may walk in them, good works that He prepared beforehand. And there's balance there to be able to see it is God, and a shepherd is a shepherded person. That's how he knows how to shepherd, and that's how he becomes a good leader. And having known God is you know who began this and who lined up all these ways for me to become who I am today. But that also does not abdicate my responsibility from looking back and seeing the human beings without putting them on pedestals, but appreciating. You know, let me just do an aside for a moment. Do you realize that many times our parents told us, you need to respect me? Even the Bible says, honor your father and mother. And then we enter the car, we go up country, and we're visiting our grandmother, their mother, their parents.
Yes.
And they ask for money. And you know, the father or the mother in this particular situation says, do you think money grows on trees in Nairobi? You know, you are always asking for money, always asking for money. Then we drive to Nairobi and they say, you know, you need to honor your parents. There's something inconsistent there.
Yes.
You know, honor needs to be, you know, spoken about, but it needs to be demonstrated.
Demonstrated, yes.
And so I think we, as leaders who have a heart of a shepherd, need to appreciate our parents. They might not be as healthy as we are now. They might not have the hand-eye coordination as we now have. They might not have as much wealth or resources, but those people God used to bring us to this world at the very least, but in many ways facilitated for us. Good bosses, I would even say bad bosses, God used. You know, they might have meant ill, but God used that to bring us to where we are. Teachers are other uncelebrated heroes because they were patient with us when we didn't know. Not only just the Great Lakes, we didn't know how to write, you know. And I think the more we appreciate the line behind us, the more capable we are of leading the line in front of us to their destiny, but to the zenith of the goal of your leadership and its potential. So the past line helps us to act in a way that shepherds, that our leadership is within a culture of shepherding. Yeah.
I appreciate the qualities that we've spoken to of a shepherd. And I'm intentionally a shepherd. One who's able to appreciate boundaries. One who seeks and looks to being trustworthy. One who provides. One who sacrifices.
One who plans.
One who plans. One who invests. One who's relational. One who's visionary. All this is fine.
You should write a book.
But when we say we've got the qualities of a shepherd, there is a good shepherd. The way we equally have a bad shepherd. Just because you're a shepherd doesn't necessarily mean that you're a good shepherd. Just because you're a leader doesn't mean you're a good leader. So, a good shepherd.
Well, I need to take you back twice. One, I don't know if you know that I grew up, I like giving this, you know, image that I grew up in the city. No, I just came to the city recently. I am a farm boy. So I grew up on a ranch. So shepherding metaphor is at home. That's what I did daily. That's what I did every day of the holidays. We didn't have any Nintendo games that were there for the, you know,
Super
90s
Mario.
kids, you know, or any of those. You are shepherding, you are shepherding, you are shepherding.
Yeah.
But I had a shepherd story that really amazed me. You know, the Eastern shepherds are very different from the Western shepherds, who mostly they shepherd for commercial purposes. But the Eastern shepherd, like, you know, these people who go for tours in Israel, and this story is about, you know, people who went to the Holy Land, and this guy was leading sheep, and the tour uh, guide would always tell them, this is how shepherding is done in Israel, and then they're driving through this ridge, and they see sheep running, and excuse me, the shepherd is not in front, which was the norm. This one is from behind. He's screaming. He has a stick up. He's throwing stones at it. And this guy opens the van window and says some things to them in the local language, and and translated as, "What are you doing? This is not how we shepherd. What kind of shepherding is this? And the guy shouts back as he continues to run, I'm not a shepherd, I'm a butcher." And it's clear there are people in leadership
Yes.
who are butchers.
Right.
They are there to fatten, and so they might, look good for a while.
But they're preparing you.
They are preparing you for the slaughterhouse.
Yes.
Now, do shepherds have, some goals? Do shepherds have some, end to that? Yes, but their end is not driven for ego, for vain profit. I add that word intentionally. And the ability to be a good shepherd is really secured by motive. Once we do the motive test for ourselves, um, we look at people's lives and faults through a microscope, they are magnified, but our own through a telescope, they're so far. If we switch that, then the propensity to be a good shepherd is increased manifold. And of course, we can only be a good shepherd, when we look at the good shepherd. And that one, there's only one. And it's a privilege that he calls us to be under shepherds. He's under shepherds. And that's the only way we can be good shepherds.
Spiritual meaning then of shepherd, when one says, the Lord is my shepherd, what picture does it paint?
For us ego people, not a very good one. Because there's a whole range of animals that could have been used to describe
Yes.
us. But the Bible chooses sheep. One Bible commentator said, over 200 times, the Bible calls us sheep. There's no mistaking about that. And sheep are not very wise. If you're driving on tarmac in this country and you see some goats crossing the road, you can keep your speed, you may adjust it slightly. If you see sheep, stop. Because they are unable to see danger. And, all the sheep that were on the right side will need to cross and follow the one that was crossing on the left side. So just stop. It is a metaphor to show that in all our stages of life, we need the shepherd and we need a shepherd. And so even when we are appointed to be under shepherds and you are appointed to be cabinet secretary for this, that, and the other, you will, because you're a Christian leader, you will need to have a shepherd's heart with those who you have jurisdiction over. But you need to have people that you are their sheep. And so they might be by appointment, but also by relationship. Those whom you can be really vulnerable to, and they're trustworthy. And so when you look at Psalm 23, it has this metaphor really described well, because David was a shepherd. And one of the most successful kings, because he went into the palace, state house if you prefer, vestry if you like, boardroom if you prefer, dining room, kitiadadi if you like, because he went with the mentality of a shepherd. He did rule, and he did, go to war. He did do several things that kings were to do, but all of them were directed by this shepherd heart.
Wow. Now, you're talking about David. Remember when they were seeking and he was not amongst with his brothers? He was missing in action, but he was the one that had been chosen. He had the heart that the Lord wanted. So when you talk about heart, and getting away from the biblical, biological heart of just pumping. And when we read that the Lord sees the heart, what does that heart mean when you say, I can see what is in your heart?
Edmund, I think you've been in media for too long because you have such hard questions. Let me just, thinking off my feet. That heart is malleability, that softness and responsiveness to God's stimuli. That, in my opinion, is what makes heart. Because if we are able to, if we get to a place where we are insensitive, it means the muscles of the heart have become so hardened that they are not going to the beat of the rhythm of the maker. So David, and I'm familiar with this, intimately familiar, because God has a way of choosing the very ordinary. When God says, a man after my own heart, it's a joke. We're almost like, Lord, maybe you didn't wear your spectacles to see well, because this guy, and you who sees the end from the beginning from the end, can't you see the Bathsheba gate affair? Can't you see the mess of his sons? And he is the direct, challenge to that particular problem of his sons, the Absalom gate. Can't you see all these things? And yet his heart was pristine, not because of his inadequacies, but because of his responsiveness and its ability to react to God's stimuli. That's why we have Psalms 51. Create in me a clean heart. His ego was so dealt with that his brokenness before God. I mean, look at how he reacts to Nathan. Nathan doesn't come the next day after the Uriah gate and Bathsheba gate. It's been a while. But when he gives this very wise story and then tells David, you are the man, David's reaction is what you're asking me. What is that heart? That is the heart. The one that doesn't say, do you know who I am? Doesn't bang the table. Security, window 2, please.
Yes.
Get rid of this one. He is able to go in and say, oh God. And I like what Psalms 51 says, against thee and against thee only have I sinned. That does not mean that he hadn't sinned against, Bathsheba, against, the
Everything
kingdom,
else,
even abuse of office.
Yes.
But he realized who was the principal offended. His sin had hurt one person more than everybody else, and it was God. That sensitivity, to God, that is what is heart. That is what makes a CEO to make a decision today. And I do follow that maxim, a bad decision is better than none at all. And after 2 weeks, realize that was a wrong decision, and be able to go back to his own closet and rework things and say, okay, if I go this way, the decision that I made is going to destroy the company, but I'll have saved face. I will look like a strong leader. Or surrender and say, how can I make changes so that we are congruent to the road of success, even if, albeit short term, I look like one who doesn't know what I'm doing, And then we're told, if you wage war, obtain counsel in the counsel of many. If you are a good shepherd, then you have, these think tanks that you trust over time, that you can lean on and listen, and then in your closet make the decision. So I think heart is that ability to respond to God.
Indeed, if I was to fast track David from that time to Kenya 2023, 24th August, I would have seen the headline in the papers, David calls for impeachment.
Aha.
Would have been a prime candidate.
Another headline, if you don't mind my suggesting,
Yes.
and you know you're the journalist, I'm not. When he's anointed,
Yes.
if that news leaked, loser anointed for office. Because there are many people
Yes.
that God chooses that you and I wouldn't give a second chance. But it's because you and I don't have those eyes to see the heart. We see what's on the CV. And the CV, I was talking to somebody the other day, the CV is like a pig that has been put lipstick. It looks lovely. You know, Miss Piggy looks wonderful, you know, with her hair and her accent and her actions. She's a pig.
Still.
Yeah, at the end of the day. But actually, even in the beginning of the day, she's a pig, you know? and we've colored our lives so much that people can't see beyond the makeup to what God sees. And that's why if you are a shepherd, as a leader, you will take time to get to know people, to spend time with people, so that you can see this is no ordinary child at 3 months and begin to put a strategy that will get them, the organization, the institution, the family to where they need to be. That's what leadership is.
What I'm picking therefore then, biblically, in context then, the heart, I would suggest, would be the seat of life or strength. Because then it means mind, soul, spirit, your entire emotional nature and understanding, all packaged. That is the heart, because then only God can see what's in your heart that others may not see or appreciate.
At best, it's translucent to us until we link up with God to see what He sees. I have nothing against people who are mediocre. Rather, I have nothing wrong against people who are super gifted. It's just that I don't belong to that tribe. I, at best, have done mediocre in this, that, and the other. And when I look at people in life, and I am not, one of those who'd be, top 40, under 40. First, I'm disqualified on age and on obesity kilos and so on. But I find people who are disadvantaged having extra sensitivity because of their disadvantage, be it academically, be it being gifted and so on, that they get the shepherd's heart part of leadership quicker than the others. Now, I'm not saying that if you're gifted, that you're a write-off. But if you are gifted, if you have seen somebody who's super gifted, whether it's educationally, academically, looks, all these things that glitter, and if you see them successful over a long period of time, then they took time to realize, these are things that God has given. They get to a point where they go prostrate before God and ego dies. So these things don't make them. They realize these are ingredients to make something else. And whereas it may be easier, for all these people, because, look at Peter. Who would have appointed him to be the leader of the early church? None of our HR, firms for the churches, how churches recruit, would have recruited him even to be an intern. His foot in the mouth, rashness, and yet God saw something. Look at Paul. And then look at how God has them working together, differently gifted, one who's Johnny come lately and looking like he's taking the limelight, but the lime and the light are all God's, Anyway, I could go on.
There is something here, and I appreciate that, and we may be misunderstood, because even the examples we're giving, the references we're making, the shepherds all seem to be of the male gender. Do we have women?
Of course we do.
Shepherds.
In fact, they are more sparkling, even if we were to use biblical examples. Deborah is one of them. Where I come from, we call her Deborah, but we can call her Deborah for today. Look at her. She's a judge. She's a mother, and she asked the commanding, the guy who is the chief of general staff or CDF now is at Ulinzi House and tells him, go and do this battle on behalf of the Lord, and and he drops the ball, and she says, I will go. But she goes and rallies the whole nation, and there's great victory. But the kingpin victory is this lady Jael. She's not even a judge. She's not even in the cabinet. She's just a woman who understood the vision and did what she needed to do. She used ujasiri, wisdom beyond her capacity, and took action. And victory was given to them. I mean, there's a whole string of ladies who have done well. Some of them super gifted. Some of them who are not so gifted, but took the baton and ran.
Rachel comes to mind.
Aha.
Rachel comes to mind.
Why?
Here, if I may quote Genesis 29, 6 and 9. Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was their shepherd. Another, Zipporah, as a shepherd.
Yes.
Now, a priest of Midian had several daughters, and they came to draw water and fill the troughs to water their father's flock. Exodus 2:16.
The daughters of Zelophehad. Scripture is full of ladies. Even in this, hall of fame of the faithful in Hebrews 11, you see several ladies there, who God puts, because age is not a factor, gender is not a factor, ethnic or race considerations is not a factor. It is that realization that this is no ordinary child, and dreaming what they could be, and then moving forward to put plans, to put strategy against the hurdles, to mitigate, those challenges for this dream to come to pass. And it does.
Wow. The Good Shepherd.
The Good Shepherd.
Let's now talk about the Good Shepherd.
Okay.
Why is Jesus the Good Shepherd?
I think of two things. One, essence. He's a good shepherd because of who he was and is. In essence, when you broke him down, he was a good shepherd. But not only because of who he was and is, but because of what he did and does. So the be and the do combine to make Jesus the good shepherd. One, in every aspect, the very essence of God. And then one of the do things, he left his throne above. He came and took on flesh, and wore it, so that we, 2 Corinthians 5:21, that we may become the righteousness of God. When we look through the Gospels, whether it is getting for us eternal life that goes, all the way to heaven, or giving us abundant life, this life matters. In fact, it so matters that he healed Lazarus. That's one of the ridiculous miracles I see in the Bible. He brought Lazarus from the dead. But you and I haven't seen Lazarus on Gong Road recently. Means he died again.
Yes.
But it was enough for Lazarus and his family who are mourning to bring him back to life. But then, after having done that, to proceed to the cross, that when Lazarus died another time, he would never have to die again. That's the good shepherd. He cares for us in this life, that this life can be abundant with all its pandashukas, but cares enough that would have real life after this life.
And here, if I may just reference here,
Yeah.
Christ knows you completely.
And yet accepts you. You know how my wife accepts us, and they know us best in terms of human. He knows even the motives. He knows things that our wives have no access to.
Yes.
And still loves us.
I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. So as his flock, remember when he says, listen,
They hear my voice.
they hear my voice, and they know, and they respond,
Mm.
and they know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father.
You know, that verse, Edmund seems to suggest to us that you can't be a shepherd without intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
But you see, corporate world has taught us you need to remove intimacy. It's inappropriate for boardroom relationships. In fact, it's for boardroom interactions. We don't even want to use the word relationships. But emotional intelligence, wave that came maybe 10, 15 years ago is beginning to change that. Is beginning to change that. There's intimacy between Christ and the Father. The Godhead has intimacy between them. And that's what makes Christ a good shepherd. But there's also intimacy with his sheep that makes him a good shepherd. So there's, again, what I was saying, the be and the do.
Again, another quality here is that Christ gave himself for you. How many of our leaders would give themselves for us? Would take the bullet, as it were, for us? I'm the good shepherd.
Can I comment on that?
Yes, lays down.
On that bullet. And it might not be a literal bullet.
No.
Just think of time.
Yes.
I appreciate that our leaders have a lot to do and so are always, time crunched. But can it really justify how they're always late for meetings? Whether it's at the boardroom, whether it's the public sphere. Some of it is for security, but some of it is just they're lazy and they're just used to things being things. They don't see themselves as the ones to sacrifice. I drive a lot on Gong Road, and it's not as bad now, but before there'd always be these cars flashing. Because they're going to an important meeting.
Get out of the way,
flash you. And go to the side, and they're using the wrong side of the road, etc. And I appreciate they could have a meeting here and have another meeting here, and they need to rush. Justified. They might have been called on the red telephone, and they have to go quickly. But some of them just didn't leave early enough and sacrifice time for the people that they lead.
That's what they told. That's bad manners. Impunity.
And it's not only with our political leaders. It's even with our corporate leaders. How do we get into the boardroom? How do we prepare for meetings? It has to do in the church. In my profession these days, it's not just good enough to be pastor. We want to be royalty. There's a saying, and I do like the honor we give ministers. I think honor is due, and carrying their bag, carrying their this, carrying the other. But I have a bad feeling in my heart. I have a knack that we who have our Bibles carried for us, the Bibles are also read for us. we don't seem to read them much, But even in the family, are there things that don't take away that position where God has put you to be honored, but yet Christ took the bullet, as it were. As a shepherd heart leader, where are you taking sacrifice? I know fathers and mothers who have sorry to take your time. Let me just tell you this story. Growing up, I'm my mother's last born child, and we would go somewhere, and she would, no, I don't want chicken, I don't want ice cream, and I grew up thinking, mother does not eat chicken, mother is allergic to ice cream, until I finished Form 6, and her school fees thing was out. I started seeing her eating these things, and I wondered, what was that about? You eat ice cream, you eat chicken, Why? She was like, if I eat chicken, you won't be able to eat chicken. So you eat chicken for now. You eat ice cream for now. Let me take it back. There will be a season. Because if both of us eat chicken, you will eat chicken, I will eat chicken, but you won't go to school. And so she would sacrifice. Do we have leadership like that in the home, in the, in the church, in the boardroom, and in the nation? you know, and not for PR purposes. We don't need to know that the sacrifices have been taken, but before God who appointed you, are you taking those sacrifices? And I'll need to watch this show because I think I need that sermon myself. Sorry, you were going ahead.
And so relevant, like you say, and here Christ called you and brought you to himself. And here I'm quoting John 10:16, where he says, "And I have other sheep that are not of this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice."
Profound. Profound. That's so visionary that there are these 99 sheep. You're secured, you're okay. But I must leave you in this place of security and go out
That one.
and get that one sheep because they are sheep. And after I have brought them, something in them will change and they will listen. But we are so parochial. You know, if we succeed, I don't know, Edmund, when your children are growing up and you have such wonderful children, I have really been amazed by your parenting and
Mostly my wife, I guess.
well, I guess you do it together because it's. I have watched you guys for a while, and I've watched your son, and wonderful grades academically, but even better is the character and the man that he's become. With this, I even forget where I was going with this. But I think one of the things that we lack is that ability to think beyond our small 99. Because I realized when I was bringing up my children, they are going to be here for the night. But the whole day, they're interacting with those others.
Out there.
And so I became a volunteer at their school. And so if the school needed some parents to do ABCD,
Get involved.
So one time they actually invited me to come and speak to the boys group and then, organize for someone to speak to the girls group. And every time I went to pick my sons, I would go before and just idle there to a point where some parents who didn't know me would say, this guy is authorized to come and pick our children over the weekend because we are out of the country and keep them in his house for the weekend with his sons. And that way, I was able to secure the 99 mine. But a leader realizes that your 99 can be influenced by external forces. So why not bust the parochial bubble and try to influence the whole, hinterland? And that's why Christ says, the others, and I'm going to go out and bring them in, and they will listen to me. It's just because they're out there, they don't know. Are there outliers in your family? A black sheep? Yeah. But I'm not saying at the expense of the 99.
No.
Once the 99 are safe, go for that black sheep. If you are head of corporate somewhere, you have somebody who, in the middle of a envisioning session, who asks just the most distracting questions and the questions that try to throw egg on your face, that's perhaps somebody that you need to, once these are secure and the vision is secure,
That's one you need to.
and you go out.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that it becomes your job description, but you need to go, and if they are sheep, you will bring them back and they will listen. But the problem is the first provocation, we have written off that person. In fact, in our minds, we have said, I'll transfer them to a department that is either very far or they are sure to fail, and their destiny is sealed.
And
That's not a shepherd.
This reminds me of where administratively, huyu ni mtukutu, so what do?
Yes.
Transfer him.
Sin bin.
Sin bin.
Yes.
Huko.
Yeah.
Asumbwe.
Cuckoo. And does not pollute.
I imagine.
I mean, if what we are doing is so strategic, there's a sense in which it's beyond being polluted. And I'm not saying have people who are always bringing the ship down. If people are poking holes in the boat, you have to deal with that. They are swimmers. You need to allow them to get into the open sea. They want water, give them more water. But I see a lack of patience in leaders who are not shepherds. We have to seal the holes and take time, on the side, deck conversations and tell them, when you drill holes here, it's not only these people that you think lowly of and my leadership that you're undermining, but eventually you yourself
I want to sink this boat.
and drown yourself.
Yeah.
And by my humble estimation, you're not that good of a swimmer anyway. And we are far from land, but also we are far from our destination. What can you do to be part of the rowing team? You might not be great at rowing, but you may be able to sit opposite from the direction that we are going and help the rowers to strategize.
As we wind up, speak to just very quickly, if you may, in under a minute or so, on the flock being owned by Christ and what it means in terms of what he gives us, eternal life, with a parting shot.
Well, shepherds in this metaphor are also sheep. They're just first among equals. They're all sheep, but the shepherd is there. And if you and I realize that we are God's, that we are God's sheep, that He's our shepherd, a lot of our insecurities that make us horrible leaders, because we're always wondering, looking behind our shoulders, who's coming for me, succession issues, who's trying to cut me down, all those cease because we have a security of tenure that is beyond the contract. When we realize, if we sit down and realize how loved we are, there's a statement I had recently, we know how deeply loved we are if we know we are loved at our worst. If we remember, and this is why I like my high school, because that's where I surrendered my life to Christ. And even just driving through that school brings me visions of God's grace, mercy, and love. And when we realize that and realize that we are so loved by God, so deeply, He can't love us more because He gave His full, then seeking love and affirmation from others, though not negative, but that becoming our daily bread, doesn't arise. We respect men and women, but we are so fed by Christ that the love of men, the affirmation of men, and all this is garnish. Important, it brings beauty, but we realize it's another work of God because we are truly loved, and like they would say at church, cherished and affirmed.
And that has been the leader, courtesy of the Evangelical Alliance of Kenya. We thank you for the privilege of your time. We don't take it for granted. Remember, next time, tell somebody to tune in to watch. What a pleasure, Reverend Mulangdi.
Thank you. It's been wonderful talking with you.
Asante. And I'm
Bless
sure
you.
there are sheep in the West.
Yes.
If you know, you know.
If you know, you know.
We'll talk about that next time. Till next week, same time, I'm Edmund Vidibo. God bless.